Hello, this is Dr. Flight, and this little video lecture is on a topic called decision involvement. And so one of the things that we want to think about, especially in marketing, is that our goal is to change some type of behavior. So it may be that we're encouraging people to buy a product or try a new service or do something, change a behavior, a habit, or adopt something new that they haven't normally done in the past. But before they do that type of behavioral change, they have to decide, in fact, to do it. They have to decide to buy the product. They have to decide to start exercising. They have to decide to start eating more healthy and so on. So the decision-making process then is something that we're vitally interested in from a marketing perspective, because ultimately we want to be able to change consumer and client behavior. So that's the notion behind the topic today, changing behavior. And more particularly the decision-making process. And so one of the ideas here is that when people look to make a decision, they have to think about it. And the amount or the degree to which they think about the idea is called involvement. So it's mental involvement in the decision-making process. So that's what this mini topic is about. And so thanks for listening. Let me know if you have any questions. Thanks. Okay, so as we begin here, we want to introduce and define the idea or concept of involvement. It's the activation of extended problem-solving behavior when the act of purchase or consumption is seen by the decision maker as having high personal importance or relevance. So that would suggest then that different decisions have different levels of importance, and they require a different level of contemplation or thinking about the actual problem. So humans have varying involvement levels in terms of their ability or their resources that are available to them. And also decisions tend to vary in the degree of involvement that's required in order to make them. So some people are able to contemplate decisions better than other people, and different decisions require different levels of involvement. So involvement then is used to express the level of mental participation or energy that's needed to make a decision. Routine behaviors, as you can imagine, require very low levels of involvement, whereas decisions that are significant and have a lot of grave consequences, like maybe buying an expensive product or making a decision that will alter your life, tend to require much higher levels of involvement. So what makes then a decision a complex or a high level involvement type of a decision? A whole bunch of things can add to the complex decision idea. The newness of the choice, for instance. So is this a choice or a decision I've made in the past, or is it something that I'm doing for the very first time? That would add to its complexity and the level of involvement that's required. Number of solutions or the number of options that are available adds to the complexity of the problem and requires more involvement as well. The magnitude of effects. So will this decision have a big impact on others or myself down the road? Cost. Okay, so this decision has all kinds of costs associated with it. Are those costs things I need to worry about? If it's a low-cost decision, then it requires less involvement. If it's a high-cost decision, of course, it requires more. The duration or the temporal or time component of the decision. So is this a decision I'm going to have to live with for a long time, or will it be one that I see the effects quickly of and then they dissipate? That would be one that would require less thought. And then finally, complexity. Complexity may indeed include many of these other items, but in general, it's how intricate and how detailed the decision is that I have to make. Are there a lot of other components and things to consider while I'm making this particular decision? Okay, so the decision complexity then plays a role on how we make decisions and how much energy we use to mentally forward while making the decision-making process. Now, there are any number of different models that describe how decisions are made. And of course, in marketing, we again do this. And for a nonprofit, this is particularly important because, we're asking people to make decisions that could change their lives or enhance their lives, certainly. So in complex decision-making models then have more or less 4 components that are illustrated by this graphic. Pre-contemplation, followed by contemplation, preparation and action, and then finally maintenance. And so we'll spend a little bit of time talking about each of these different steps here, but generally speaking, you move through each of these steps during a decision-making process. If it's a decision you've made in the past and you're familiar with this decision, then you might move through this process faster. Or if it's a more complex type of a problem or a more challenging problem, you might spend a little bit more time, walking through these steps. So during the pre-contemplation stage, then it's a period prior to the awareness or the effortful thought then needed to be able to think about the problem. So it's before you maybe even are aware that you have a problem. It might be that you're an individual and you're not aware that you have some unmet need. You may not know that there's even a problem that exists or that there are solutions that could potentially solve your problem. The other option here is you may know that there are solutions, or you may be somewhat aware that there is a need that you need filled, but you're not quite ready to begin the thought process of solving that problem. So if somebody knows they have a need, I should eat more healthy, a more healthy diet, but I'm not quite ready to actually commit or decide, or I don't even really want to look into it right now. That's a pre-commitment type of a statement there. The market's principal challenge here is to create, the marketer's challenge here is to create awareness. What we need to do if someone's in the pre-contemplation stage is make the consumer or client aware that they have a problem or a need that needs to be filled, and begin to give them information to satisfy that need. So we need to, or at some point, a trigger needs to happen where the consumer or the client feels or is jolted into reaction, recognizing that they have a need that needs to be met. And oftentimes it's our external signals to them that helps remind them of this. So when we advertise, we're triggering an awareness in the consumer so that they can begin and they can enter into the pre-contemplation stage. We're essentially jump-starting the decision-making process for them when we do marketing activities that remind them or build awareness of a problem and also of our solution that we have that can solve their problem. Okay, so after the pre-contemplation stage, we get into the contemplation stage, right, which is where we spend a lot of time here thinking about this process. The contemplation stage is where much of the marketing activities are seen, where we want the consumer or the client to think about the need they have and then the solutions that they have and how those solutions can best serve the customer's or client's overall needs. So as you walk through the model that we saw a slide or two ago, and please, if you need to pause this and go back, please do so to look at the model again. In that model, there are several different steps, one of which is the early contemplation period. So the audience then just becomes aware of the need of the problem. So they're not quite in pre-contemplation anymore, but they've just entered contemplation stage because you as a marketer have made them aware that there is a need and a solution that could help solve a problem that they have. The late contemplation stage is a period where they have thought about their solutions, thought about how they could solve their problems, and they're ready to move forward with some type of a decision. Marketers during this period need to communicate the benefits and the costs of their solution or offer. So if I'm a nonprofit and I know that somebody has a specific need for, say, art entertainment, then what I need to do is make sure that they know that my theater can provide them certain benefits and that there will be costs, but those benefits will outweigh their costs. That would be the value proposition or the offer. I need to emphasize the benefits that I can offer over my competitors. So coming to my theater offers you, maybe a special show or special features that you're not going to get somewhere else. But then we also want to do other things. We want to remind them of how going to the theater will boost their self-esteem. They'll see people they know, that they recognize. It'll be full of other people who are just like them, and how this is going to build up their self. So communicating the benefits of their cost and costs of my solution. Number two, emphasizing what makes our solution better by differentiating ourselves from our competitors. Number three, illustrating how this fits into their social life and how this builds their sense of self. Those are the things that we're going to look at in this stage. Moving forward through contemplation, then this stage can be difficult, or it can be complicated, if you will, to be able to narrow down or specify that our solution is the best for them. So like one of the challenges here is once the consumer hits contemplation, they may be inundated with a lot of different solutions, but they need to go through a process where they narrow those solutions down to find which one is best for them. So there's a lot of mental processing that's happening here. During this contemplation stage where you go from early to late, where the consumer is going from a big selection set to a small selection set, they're gathering information, they're learning about the various solutions that could solve their problem. They're forming what we call a choice set, which are the options for them that meet their decision requirements. And again, it often begins with a broad set and then is fairly narrow at the end of maybe 2 or 3 options. We need to make sure we're offering a lot of information so that the consumers can keep our option within their information set, and that our option is feasible or will actually solve their specific need. Finally, the consumer may do what we call a decision weight or decision criteria and weighting process. So if we have an idea of problem or whatnot, then things that would be important to us would be: how much do I have to pay? How much time does it take? How reliable are the results? How much risk am I going to involve? How much will this alienate me? So those are 5 things that might be what we call decision criteria. So we had some cost issues, we had time issues, we had likelihood that it would succeed issues, we had issues that dealt with whether others would think, social pressures and things like that. So those are the decision criteria. The next step there would be to assign some type of a weight. So if price is most important to me, that would be the most important criteria. If what my friends think about me, going to this theater, if that's the second most important thing to me, then it would have still a very high weight that I place on that criteria, but it wouldn't be as high maybe as price or cost. So the idea here is that when we do decision criteria and weights, is the consumer, while they're narrowing down their selections to solve their problem, They rigorously evaluate the pros and the cons of each option, and they weight those options appropriately. Okay, that's kind of this idea where through the contemplation stage, within this contemplation stage again, we've got something that we call these decision sets. I mentioned choice sets, and so this choice set idea can actually be narrowed down in a little bit greater detail. And again, another illustration here. This is an illustration for a student who's thinking about going to college, and they've got the total set is the set of all colleges. It's what all the colleges out there. Now, it's not realistic for the young person to consider going to all colleges. That'd just be overwhelming. So they need to kind of think about colleges that would be realistic for them to go to. So you begin by looking at the colleges that they're first aware of. So an awareness set would be the list of colleges that they're familiar with, that they know about, that they have a concept of. Obviously, you're not going to go to a college that you're not aware of. It would be their job to begin to build awareness by sending information to the prospective student so that these unaware institutions could eventually come up and be in the awareness set up here. But as it is, you're only going to be in the awareness set if you know about the college, and those would be the only ones that you choose from. Based on the awareness set, then what you do is start weighing the pros and cons of each of the options using your decision criteria again, and maybe a weighting method to actually think about. So this is the consideration set that is important. Because we've got some colleges here. Maybe these are colleges that are maybe you wouldn't get into, or maybe they're too far away or too expensive based on the decision criteria. They don't meet the criteria that you have set. Yet these that are still in the consideration set, they're the things that are still meet your decision criteria. Which then eventually leads to your choice set and your non-choice set that's available to you. So these are the colleges then that meet the criteria that you're aware of, and you've used a weighting system to determine which ones. You could probably order these, place these in a specific order, and then let's assume you apply to all four of them because they would all be acceptable for you, and ultimately maybe you decide on one to go to. And so this is a complex process. Now, we make these decisions, we make complicated decisions easier by breaking them down. And I mentioned this idea of a decision criterion, decision weight process. So just again to reiterate, this is a two-step process where we determine choice criteria, which would be things like price, time, commitment, strength of effect, impressions of others, and so on. I use the illustration of a theater and a person who's deciding, what criteria would cause me to choose one entertainment option over another, and it may be time commitment or impression of others and things like that. So we need to decide what criteria are important to us as a decision maker, and then the second part is to again assign what we call a criteria weight, which will apply, because in most cases, like price may be more important than, say, impression of others. And if that's the case, then whatever the price difference is between two options, I'll look at that as a more important type of a thing. Okay, so again, decision making processes here. Second two categories in the decision-making process, then preparation and action, and then finally maintenance. So within preparation and action, and again, if you want to go back and look at the main chart, you can do that. But preparation then is where we prep the consumer or the client to accept the offer. They've not quite made a commitment yet, but they've narrowed down the choice and they're ready to act. They're ready to make the decision and the actual action. The action then requires a push that the marketers can finally make. It's a commitment stage. So even though you've narrowed down your selection set and you're down to a couple, you might have even decided what that one option is you're going to choose. You still need to act. A lot of people make a decision. I'm going to lose weight this year, but I'm not quite ready to go to the gym. That action stage is that last stage there before I actually commit that needs sometimes a little extra push. So the local YMCA offers a free trial period for 30 days. And they kind of know that if somebody commits to something for 30 days, 30 to 40 days, it'll become a habit. And so once they commit to 30 or 40 days then for free, then they're much more likely to stick with it and stay with the program. But it's that action and that actual physical commitment that is holding them back at this particular point. So things that we can do to make these actions happen. Can you then in your process, can you give people more time? Can you add time elements? Can you temporarily lower the price so that it becomes more enticing and that price barrier isn't there anymore? Can you spread payments over time? Can you offer other benefits also that help sway the consumer or client to actually act? So action's a big deal here because that's what we want to do as marketers anyways. The last step then is maintenance. So the idea here is once somebody acts and behaves, we want them to continue to do that. So it's an upkeep of continuous behavioral actions and monitoring that we have. So ideally, once a decision is committed to and then acted upon, the effects of this decision should linger. However, these effects, like I'm gonna lose weight, I am so committed to doing so. But 2 or 3 months from now, I'm not quite as committed and I'm not quite as excited about this. These effects diminish over time. So I want to be able to, I want to be able to continue that. So joining a gym in January but failing to continue the workouts in February is a good illustration of how maintenance was not continued. Stopping smoking while in a controlled environment like at work, but then smoking when the power to resist, the willpower is low, that's a good example of how maintenance is not kept. Committing to donate money to a church fundraiser during a launch event is common, but then not actually sending in the money a month or two later after the event has taken place is a maintenance issue. So we've got to maintain motivation, maintain incentives, maintain all of this to continue on. So marketers need to engage in what we call reminder campaigns and communications to follow up the idea of a commitment that has been made. We need to make sure that this follow-up continues until a habit is formed. All right, so this has been a review then of the decision-making process. This is actually a super complex concept, and a lot of people spend a lot of time on books in psychology studying this. So we use it a ton in marketing to better understand how consumers make decisions and how we can influence that decision-making process. We'll talk more about involvement, but involvement, and again, it's this activation of a decision-making problem or a decision-making process where the consumer has to think about something they're going to do. There are a number of different aspects then that complicate a problem, that necessitate either more or less involvement based on the complexity of the problem itself. And then we had this big model, the complex decision-making model, with 4 stages: pre-contemplation, contemplation, preparation, action, and maintenance. One of the key ideas here is that there are decision criteria and weights that can be used to help the consumer walk through a logical step of processes, or the way we think sometimes in terms of how decisions are made. Okay, so that wraps this little segment up on decision involvement and decision criteria and decision making in general for the consumer. Please rewatch or rewind, all you need to do for that. And please, again, reach out to me if you have any questions. Thank you.